I am here with Jason Reynolds, who is monitor engineer for
Maverick City.
Who else you doing? It can't just be just
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah, I do monitors for the Marley brothers, Damien and Stephen Marley.
Okay.
So that's my regular day-to-day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit different than the Marley
Very different.
brothers.
But it's good to be here. I was on the reunion tour last year with Kirk Franklin and guests, and then I did the One Hallelujah tour with Undivided, so they asked me to come back for Maverick City.
Okay, so what got you into monitoring? Actually, hold up. Rewind. Where are you from?
Okay. I'm from Kingston, Jamaica.
Kingston,
originally.
Jamaica, and now you live in Kingston, or?
No, I live just outside Toronto in Canada.
That's a big jump.
Very big jump. Yeah, my parents moved there when I was 20 years old, and I decided to follow them. So.
Okay, so what
Yeah,
got you
I'm
into doing sounds?
So
Have you always been
actually-
inside the snake?
I always say I'm a monitor engineer at heart, but I started in church. So I actually learned how to do sound in church. I went to a church in Jamaica called Pentecostal Tabernacle, and my mentor was a gentleman by the name of Paul Price, and he taught me everything I know about sound, and that's where I started. That was very long before I ever thought it could be a career, but I fell in love with it. He helped me develop a love for it, and years later when we moved to Canada, I studied recording engineering, but had a passion for live, so kind of just stuck with live.
Did you do monitors for the church, or did you do front of house for it?
We only had one console. It was monitors from front of house. But at the time, it was, we thought it was great. It was the Allen and Heath MH4.
Yeah.
Nice big 48 channel.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
It was about when I was 16, so quite a while back.
Okay, so now connect the dots for me from your running sound at a church to now you're on tour. What got you onto your first tour?
So way back in the day when we moved to Toronto, I used to freelance, and I actually ended up doing quite a bit of shows with some gospel artists. I worked with Fred Hammond, Israel, Ty Tribbett for a while. They used to call me. Yeah, they used to call me to mix a lot of their concerts whenever they came to Toronto if they didn't have an engineer. And I got into freelancing, but I always wanted to, tour with an artist. So years before that, I had worked with an artist named Papa San, and his drummer, Brian Williamson, calls me up one day. We had stayed in touch. And he said to me, Shaggy was looking for a monitor engineer if I'd be interested. And the rest, as they say, is history. I said, yeah, I'd be interested. And a few weeks later, I was on a plane to Guam, and I've never looked back. I've been touring ever since. Okay,
so from doing front of house to monitors, has the experience of doing front of house changed or helped your way of mixing monitors in any way?
I think it's the other way around for me.
Okay.
I think the precision and the speed that you need at monitors helps as a front house engineer. I've been blessed also to work with artists like Stephen Marley, who are very particular about the sound of the music and how it translates on the monitor side and how they need to hear the music. And so it's made me a better engineer. I think now when I go back and do front house, it's with a different perspective. So I think it's actually helped me become a better front house engineer by mixing monitors.
So one thing that I've said this many times, but I feel like monitor engineer is the only job here that your technical skill comes second to communication.
Yeah.
And honestly, being able to give artists not only what they're asking for, but what they're not asking for.
Absolutely.
Because if you just keep adding more and more and more to something, you may damage their ears when they may need something else less out of that.
Yeah. And the truth is, most artists know what they want to hear, but they may not know how to explain it. So it's as much as, like you're saying, as much of what they're not saying and what they're saying. They have very interesting ways of describing things, words that they use to describe how something sounds.
Yeah.
So learning the artist that you're working for and developing a rapport and comfort with that artist is important.
What's your advice to younger engineers that are maybe having a hard time balancing that communication with artists?
I think I think first and foremost, you can't take anything personal. When you're sitting in this chair, I always describe it when you're in the trenches and bullets are flying over your head. Sometimes things are said that in the moment are not necessarily communicated in the nicest way possible. You can't take it personal. You just have to understand that it's part of the gig. I think that's one thing. And I think always how I explain it is sort of maintaining an even temperature on your stage. So you have to be very aware of people in the band, for example, that if they're not attended to, they may get a little antsy, and that will raise the overall temperature of your stage. I think keeping things even, communicating clearly is very important. That goes a very long way. And then speed. I think if you work on your speed, and sometimes you don't have to be the best when it comes to EQing and all those technical things, but if you're quick, getting artists what they need when they ask for it, that goes a long way as well.
So from doing both sides to the CCM world and Christian worship world to also doing the other quote unquote secular side, is your approach to mixing both the same? Do you find some different nuances in the CCM world as opposed to in the worship world as opposed to?
I think the approach is the same. What's different is some genre specific things. So certain instruments in different genres play a more prominent role, and the tone of those instruments change. So understanding first and foremost what the music is supposed to sound like goes a long way in helping you mix it, right?
Yeah.
So if you know, I heard Robert Scoville put it this way: you must have a steady diet of different types of music, because that's the only way you're gonna know what that music is supposed to sound like if you've never heard it before, you know?
I love your talk back, Mike. I've never seen anybody with not just an SM7, but a custom SM7.
Yeah, it's actually a friend of mine who hooked it up for me. He also works for sure in some capacity, but he's a good friend of mine, and he said, hey, I'm gonna send you something. Yeah, dope.
All right, I want to ask a little bit about this console, because I know that a lot of times people who are using Digicos are typically macro or snapshot heavy with it.
Yes.
Do you do a lot of snapshots, a lot of macros?
I am on this show. This show, as much as it's a Christian show, is very similar to a pop show. So a lot of playback. They do the same thing every night in terms of song list, song order. I run time code, so the show is fairly heavy snapshots. This is my opener file that's up right now, so there's not many snapshots going. But I'm sure later, if you're walking around, you'll be able to get some footage of. But it's fairly snapshot heavy. I think I'm running about 67 snapshots on the show.
Well, you're also very unique in the fact that like you have 9 principals here.
Yes.
Not just one for it.
Right.
What's your approach to that? Because usually with artists, you'd have one person that you're focusing on.
Right. So the cool thing is how they set up the rehearsals, the production rehearsals. We started with the band so I could build their mixes. While they rehearsed, I took that opportunity to build mixes for the principals, and then the background vocals came in last. So while the principals were rehearsing, I built the mixes for the background vocals, and then it's just tweaking as we go. So it's really, you know, if you maintain organization, like if you keep it really organized and you have a process, I think that really helps with it.
Before it gets crazy loud, one of the things I think is very important in the Christian world is, not important, but used a lot, is MD, talkbacks, that kind of stuff. Can you walk us through a couple of those?
Let's go up and show you that. All right, so this is Brunus' station. Brunus is the music director for the show. All our band members are on talkbacks, and we also have an artist talkback. So basically, if any of the artists want to talk to me during the show, they come over and use this talkback mic. The cool thing that we're doing is we're using what's called an optogate, and it's a gate for the microphone that's triggered by an infrared sensor. So as they walk up and get close to the mic, it opens it up. Once they step away, it closes it, so you don't have to worry about like bleed in the microphone. So that's pretty unique to what we're doing here. And then the other guys are just using radial hotshot DM1s to sort of be a push-to-talk type of switch for their talkback microphones. And it just allows them to be able to talk. I'm on the floor and the stage is 6 feet high. so I can't really see to the other side of the stage. So them having talkbacks, they can talk to me at any time, and it helps with the communication, obviously.
All right.
If they need anything.
Talk to me about something. One thing that's very popular with gospel music is gospel drums.
Yeah.
And the sound for gospel drums.
Yeah,
What's the trick to getting gospel sounding drums?
I mean, to be honest, I'm old school, so it's good tuning, the right skins, you know, the right type of hydraulic skin, pinstripe skins are a big part of it. The type of wood you use for the drum kit. You know, most guys tend to like birch kits because they have a little bit more attack and cut a little bit more than, let's say, like a maple kit. But a good solid, good sounding drum kit and well-tuned drum kit is really the key. But we're not doing anything very different in terms of how we mic it. Typical kick in and out microphone. So we're using, on this particular tour, we're using a Beta 91 and a 52 combination. KSM 137 on hi-hats. My choice, most of the microphones are chosen by our front of house guy, Wesley, but my choice for snare top is, on this one, is the Bear Dynamic M201. So we're using that on the main snare. And yeah, one unique thing that we do in gospel is they use clap stack. So we're miking that clap stack for those moments. If I had a stick, I'll see if you can sort of hear what it sounds like. So it literally sounds like a clap. So we're miking that underneath, similar to how you'd mic a ride mic, just to get that pronounced in the mix. But yeah, I mean, other than that, we're not doing anything real fancy with how we mic the drum kit.
I've noticed there's not a lot of wedges out here. There's a couple up here, but y'all have a pretty clean stage.
Yeah, so all the artists are on ears. We're using the wedges just as like a fail-safe if a pack dies, if something happens and they can't, you know, in-ear cable goes bad while then we have the wedges on, kind of just as a fail-safe, but we're not really relying on them. Everybody's on ears.
I noticed you also have a massive thrust here.
Yeah.
Now, thrust can be a good and a very bad thing. What are some tricks to be able to use a thrust without it going to chaos?
Well, first and foremost, I think a great systems engineer is the key to that. I think here Eric we're using the L Acoustics K1, K2 combination. So on the K2 boxes, which are the used for the downfills, he's closed the louvers on the waveguide to keep sort of high end off of the thrust as much as possible. That kind of helps with feedback. From a monitor's perspective, you really got to dial in the ears with a solid drum mix, especially for timing. Because and I encourage the artists, I was like, when you're on the thrust, really bad idea to take an air out because you're going to get different arrival times from what you're hearing in your ears versus what's coming from the PA. So I think if you got a good solid mix with everything in there, click especially so they can keep timing, it helps. But nobody likes having a thrust way out in front of the PA.
Yeah, no, I like that.
But it is becoming a thing though. You know, a lot of tours now have B stages and, you know, everybody will see later, we have a moment in the show where they do an acoustic set from out in the crowd. So it's really just dialing in. And like I said, from the systems engineer is your best friend in those times, making sure that we sort of keep high end off of the thrust.
Yeah. I love that, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
What's your advice to younger engineers that want to be in your position one day?
I mean, I always tell people I mentor my students that you have to become the best version of yourself before the call even comes. So there's no such thing as luck. It's really the cross-section of preparation meeting opportunities. So if you're prepared, I had a mentor of mine tell me that if you can use any console, then you can get any gig, right? And so I just focused in my early years, focused on becoming really good at being the best engineer I could be, being the best possible version of me, but also learning how to use gear, learning how to use every console. And as long as you do that, you work hard, you keep a very high standard, you never know when somebody's going to take notice. So whether you're mixing for 10 people or you're mixing for 1,000 or you're mixing for 10,000 in an arena, you should really have the same approach. Yeah. You should bring the same level of enthusiasm and you should bring the same level of attention to detail because you never know who's going to be sitting. You can mix a gig for 10 that leads to you mixing for Madonna for 1 million, right? because of somebody who was sitting in that room listening to you mix.
Yep. While we're here, walk me through what you're using. Walk me through your gear.
All right, so I know it's a little bit loud. I'll try to do this quickly so you guys can hear. So obviously the Digital SD5, start the recording, because I always forget to start the recording, so that's old school. That just reminds me, I use a Stream Deck that controls my Reaper on my computer, so it's just some quick controls to be able to control Reaper. I can drop markers in for different songs as we go. I use a Timecore SMPTE to MIDI timecode converter. That's what's feeding the console with timecode. And then that all connects to my processing rack, so I try to bring this out with me on every tour. On the top screen, you'll see, I'm gonna switch the bottom screen so you guys can see that too. On the top screen, we've got Waves. I have a Waves Axis 1, 2 Extreme servers running redundant. And then I'm a big Clang user. I'm a big supporter of Clang 3D in-ear monitoring, immersive. I can't mix in stereo. Once you experience 3D, it's real hard to go back to stereo. I've been using Clang for about 8 years now. And they're great. Phil and the guys at Clang are incredibly good to me, and they've helped me get to this point. I'm using a Clang conductor that you'll see down here in the rack. The conductor is their flagship model. It does 128 inputs and 16 immersive mixes, and I'm running all the inputs and outputs via MADI. So it has 2 MADI DMI cards in there. And then I have my personal favorite, which is my CL1B compressor, 2-Tech CL1B. It's my favorite compressor by far, analog compressor. So I'm using that on Tasha Cobb's vocal. You'll see it still has a Damian sticker on there because it came off of the Marley Brothers tour. I was using it on Damian Marley's vocal. It's an incredibly fast but transparent compressor, so you don't really hear the compression. It's phenomenal. So I'm using it on Tasha Cobb's vocal on this tour, and that's pretty much my setup.
Ears.
Ears, yeah. On this one, we got a bunch of short accent for microphones and PSM 1000s. This is all owned by Undivided Touring, which is a company that produces this tour. So we're using short PSMs and Accent Digital. And then, of course, 2 SD racks. We're running about 95 inputs on the show. So pretty much almost maxed out 2 SD racks.
Gee. We're going to step aside for a second because it's loud as crap in there.
Yeah.
I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
One of them being, I'm sure you've never had a failure ever in your life. Tell me about your biggest failure you made, and what did you learn from it?
I've been blessed where I've never been fired from a gig, which is amazing. I really can only attribute that to God's favor on my life. I tell people that I am my grandmother's answered prayers, because I used to wake up to her pounding the floor, praying over myself and my brother and whatever we put our hands to, and the people that would be brought into our life that would interact with us in any way. So that's really what I can attribute any success that I've had and the way my career has gone is, my grandmother used to always tell me that the steps of a righteous man are ordered, and I always believe that. And so, but I have had failures personally, right? And just like anybody else, I've had things that I haven't been great at in my personal life, in my relationships, in many different areas. But somehow I've always been able to find grace. God's grace has been sufficient, been incredible. And I can tell you that if you stay focused and you keep working hard, you somehow always rebound from those times, because your failures don't define you. You can learn lessons from the mistakes that you made and the failures that you have, but they don't define who you are.
So touring is definitely an interesting industry, because it's like touring is not real life.
Right.
And then you go back to real life, and then you come back after this. How do you keep grounded in this chaos of whatever you call this?
Yeah, I think family. My family keeps me incredibly grounded. My background, like I said before, I was raised in church. My mom is definitely a praying woman, and my grandmother was too. And I've learned that from them. I've learned the value of prayer. I've learned the value of faith and trust in God. and keeping good people around you. I believe I call them truth tellers. Having people in
Yeah.
your life who will tell you the truth, that don't have an ulterior motive. They just want to see you win. They want to see you grow. And so whether or not that truth is comfortable or uncomfortable, you don't ever question their motives for sharing that. You just know that they're telling you the truth for your betterment as a person. And so I think having people like that around you and in your life is very important.
What is one genre of music you're dying to mix for?
Oh man, I think if I could mix for Stevie Wonder, that would be incredible. I think he's a musical hero of mine. But to be very honest, I am blessed to mix the genre of music that I grew up listening to. I was a fan of Stephen Marley long before I ever met him, long before I ever even touched a console and mixed for him. I think the legacy of, we just finished the Marley Brothers Legacy Tour. Bob Marley's legacy, not just for Jamaica as a country, but in my own life, is incredible. His impact is incredible. So, while I always say, Stevie Wonder would be a dream gig, if I'm being honest, I do have my dream gig right now, which I get to mix for the Marleys. Shaggy was incredible for me for 10 years. Shaggy, obviously, being a diamond selling artist, not many artists can say that they've sold 10 million records, right? I've learned an incredible amount from him about the business, about the industry, about life. And so I've been blessed, man. I can't really say, there's people out there, but they're no longer living, like Michael Jackson. But, in terms of who's still on the planet with us, I think that's the one, Stevie Wonder, but I'm really blessed now.
What is the best piece of advice you've got from one of your mentors?
Well, there's so much good advice. I shared one earlier that if you can, be the best you, become the best version of you. But I think just, sometimes we try to box mentorship into these little nuggets of advice, quote unquote. But for me, it just being able to model someone's life and how they approach life and how they approach their career, and reading between the lines, if you will, just being able to watch somebody who was being successful and being able to look over their shoulder at how they approach life, how they approach their career. I don't know if I can necessarily narrow it down to one particular sentence that they've said to me, but yeah, I definitely got my love for audio engineering from Paul Price. We still keep in touch to this day. He still lives in Jamaica, but we keep in touch. I always bring it back to that, the early days of just learning and falling in love with it, and the passion that he had for it. Just to see that passion and the passion he had for teaching it keeps me going to this day. I still try to be like him.
What was the last song you mixed that made you emotional in a good way?
This tour, Chandler Moore has a new song out called What I Needed. You'll hear it tonight. The lyrics is an incredible song. Everything about this song is incredible. He talks about God's love for us, and basically, sometimes God doesn't always give us what we want, but what we need. And I think that's it. I can identify with that throughout my life, because he's always done what was right for me, not necessarily what I thought was right for me, but what he thought was right for me. And so, as a believer, that song resonates with me incredibly. I've heard it now. We've been in rehearsals for 10 days. So I think I've heard it at least 100 times. Tonight we get to hear it with an arena full of people singing along. I think it's going to be incredible.
What do you think separates a good monitor engineer from a great monitor engineer?
Being attentive, I think, is constantly. You can't take a moment off during a show. Sometimes that's difficult, especially if you're mixing music that you love. Sometimes you tend to zone out and get lost in the show and in the music, but you got to remain attentive. You got to remain zoned in. And I like to think that speed is very important. On a gig like this, I have 24 mixes. So getting mixes dialed in, handling requests during a sound check, speed becomes very important. And obviously organization, remaining organized, how you lay out your console is a big deal. Making sure you have the right tools. Because sometimes, when I was early in my career, when you're a younger engineer, not as experienced, you're afraid to ask for the tools that you need to do your job. I think you have to develop that confidence to go, if I need this to be successful, and without it, I don't think I can be. You need to have that conversation to ask for the tools. And then having a really big toolbox too, right? Because what if you can't get that specific tool, then how adaptable are you? I think those things combined probably pushes you to that next level of being a great monitor engineer.
I think one of the very important things is always learning and understanding that like there's always stuff we can be learning from. What is one of the
that's life though, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Always learning.
Absolutely.
You know, always being in a position to receive knowledge too, right? Because sometimes we don't learn things not because things aren't there to be learned. It's just we're not open to learning. And maybe sometimes the information is coming to us from a source that we don't think could necessarily teach us something. But if we were receptive to hearing, you never know, a child could walk up and say something and a light bulb goes off in your head and all of a sudden you've now acquired a new skill, right?
So with that, what's one of the coolest new tricks or skills you've learned recently?
I learn from young guys like Wesley all the time. He does cool things like side chaining all over the place. And, you know, he's all that. I tell my techs all the time, I'm old school, so I only know how to turn my computer on and shut it down at the end of the night. If it breaks, I don't know how to fix it. But obviously learning from these young guys here on the road as techs on different skills that they have or how they do things, or understanding how a patch guy likes to lay out things, how we troubleshoot. You never know. You learn different skills. I actually, with this tour, color coding and organizing my snapshots. One of the guys I mentored actually called me after I posted an Instagram video and went, "Why are all your snapshots red?" So I go, "Because you can change the color." So he sent me videos on how to. So now I have it laid out by song. Any snapshots in the middle of songs are in italics. Like it's all hooked up now. So yeah, that's I learned that this week. So that's Fred.
So if people want to follow you and follow your career, where can they follow you at?
So I'm on Instagram at engineer_Redz, REDZ, and the train is passing right now. So that's Instagram at engineer_Redz, REDZ.
Or come to a Maverick City show near you. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
This is amazing.